This is the IoT for All Media Network. Hello, friends in IoT. Welcome to Let's Connect, the newest podcast in the IoT for All Media Network. I am Ken Briota, Editorial Director for IoT for All, and your host. If you enjoy this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, and comment on all your favorite podcasting platforms. And to keep up with all the IoT insights you need, visit iotforall.com. Before we get into our episode, the IoT market will surpass $1 trillion in the next few years. Is your business ready to capitalize on this new and growing trend? Use Leverage's powerful IoT solutions development platform to efficiently create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. Help your customers increase operational efficiency, improve customer experience, or even unlock new revenue streams with IoT. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. Now, let's connect. My guest today is Jeremy Prince of Sigfox, and we're going to be talking about, a lot of things today. We're going to get pretty broad. But first, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. It's always great to talk to you, and I am glad to bring you into our newest show here. But before we jump in case some of the listeners aren't familiar with you or with Sigfox somehow, because, I don't know, maybe they're new to the IoT. Can you give us a little bit of your background and sort of what home base is for Sigfox?
Okay, so usual joke, as you can hear, I'm a pure Texan. So more seriously, I moved to the US from Europe, where I was with Sigfox in France. I moved to the US about a year and a half. Sigfox, for the people that aren't aware of who we are and what we do. So it's a company that was founded around 10 years ago in France. A network and a technology for IoT based on an old technology. So how to do new with old, because it uses radio. It's an LPWAN technology. We like to see it as the basis of all the networks. And you've got 3G, 4G, 5G. Well, we are 0G because we like to see ourselves as simple, robust, and frugal. And for a lot of IoT use cases, that brings a lot of benefits.
So it's been a couple of years since we talked. We were realizing earlier. And since then, there's been a lot that's been going on with Sigfox. And of course, I don't know if you've noticed, but the last 10 to 12 months have been very unusual. So let's take the temperature. Let's see what's been going on. The last really big news I heard from Sigfox was that the platform had gone from closed to open. And that it's sort of more widely available for folks to access your bandwidth and connectivity. What else has been going on?
So first of all, one of the huge benefits of Sigfox for our customers is that we are a really international solution. So it doesn't depend on roaming, on SIM cards, etc. It's one cloud, and your asset can be in France, in Britain, or in Texas. It will be talking in the same way to the same cloud, and you'll access the data exactly in the same way. And the number of countries has been growing, and we're now in over 70 countries.
What has the last year been like for Sigfox? I mean, IoT in general saw some pretty big acceleration. I mean, after the first 2 or 3 months where everybody just sort of stopped to figure out what was going on, it seemed like everybody sort of realized, we need a lot of help to do all this remote work. We need all this automation to happen. We need a lot of remote monitoring, more supply chain granularity in our data collection, all of which requires a lot of connectivity of a lot of different kinds. So in Sigfox's piece of that connectivity puzzle, web, I don't know what we call it. Let's call it a mosaic. Ooh, I like
Nice.
Thank you. A mandala of connectivity. How has it been for Sigfox over the last year? Have you seen acceleration? Have you seen what's been the effect?
I think you're spot on. For IoT, this whole crisis is going to be, in a way, a great accelerator. For the first months, I would say I see a bit longer than you did. I would say until the end of the summer, until July, August, things were rather on pause mode because either existing customers were had other things to cope with, or new potential customers didn't think it was right the time to start investing in digitalization and things like that. So things did slightly pause until August. Since then, I think we're getting to the other side of the scope where, as you said, people realize now that IoT is key to improve many things that have been hit or really focused on during this pandemic. I mean, logistics is one. I like to say that we ran out of toilet paper. I mean, the first power in the world, and everyone was in a frenzy to get to stack up toilet paper. That says a lot about how you can improve logistics.
Sure.
And I'm saying it on this funny note, or at least it wants to be funny. But on the other end,
well, I tell you what, I personally cannot wait until they stock the toilet paper back up because my rags are starting to run out.
But if you look at the other end, and on a more serious note, although toilet paper is still very serious, but when I track today, because like everyone, I'm tracking the vaccine campaigns, etc. And one thing that really strikes me is I see the numbers, and I see in the different states the percentage of the vaccines that are actually should be available that are being used, and this percentage is pretty low. And you're talking about vaccines that got to be at a very steady temperature, et cetera, et cetera. So
not very low. In the case of the Pfizer one, it's like it's cryogenically cold,
exactly,
I believe.
Exactly. And I'm thinking here, so a bit too early for Sigfox. We're not at that scale yet in the US, but that would have been a dream use case for Sigfox because our technology is particularly relevant for that. For tracking, improving the ETA, making sure that they stayed at the right temperature all along, knowing that you're going to get so many doses that day or that hour in that center. You can line up the people. Today, it's sort of they're doing their best, but it's still a bit of a mess. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to do there.
Both of the major pharmaceutical companies are complaining that they've got warehousing problems where they've got supply, they just can't get it to where it needs to go.
Hopefully it will improve and we'll get our vaccine soon. But but seriously, when we look at what we do with Michelin, so Sigfox in France signed with Michelin to track containers, and it illustrates my point. Just by tracking the container, they've improved drastically the ETA, so knowing when it's going to arrive, and they've improved the transit time by, I think, 1 to 2 days. And it seems like not that much, but in fact, it's tens of millions of dollars.
Well, sure, that's huge. The scale alone of 1 to 2 days per container, I mean, is gigantic. That means that a ship is potentially weeks ahead of schedule, or at least ahead of where it would have been previously.
Exactly. And it means that they don't have to, because that was really for tires, so big tires, not the tire that you and I put on your car and my car. Well, I don't know about your car, but mine is fairly reasonable. No, but tires are worth a lot of money. So having to produce less because you've got less in transit is a lot of money. So it's really big. And so logistics is an easy one to spot. And everyone says, yes, of course. But I think it's interesting to see that this whole pandemic, I believe, is going to change quite a few things. I think from the way we use our offices is going to change. A lot of people are still at home, are working from home. So companies are starting to realize, well, why should I pay that much for that much space when I've realized that people can work from home, maybe not all the time because it's good to be together, but it will change the mix. And there IoT can also bring a lot there to give visibility. We've got a solution. It's a company in Europe, a startup that's built a solution, and there are others to monitor space occupancy. So you can know real time how many people are there, are the meeting rooms used, etc. And in fact, you realize pretty quickly that you're renting or owning a lot of space that you don't need.
Well, yeah, and I think that generally speaking, and I want to get into this, I'm pretty optimistic about the future as enabled by IoT technology. But I think in the very short term, the commercial real estate market is in a lot of trouble. I think that there's a real potential for a problem, not unavoidable. I think it can be mitigated or potentially avoided, but if not acted upon quickly, I think that a lot of companies are just going to go, well, I guess we can be fully remote. And it's not like many employees are going to complain about that, or they're going to just rent, a conference room when they need one, or, a small space for a couple of desks and do modular offices and things like that. I don't think you're going to see nearly as many companies having 10,000 square feet where everybody's at a cubicle or something. I think that those big empty buildings are going to have to be rethought. And one of the ways to do that is going to be with IoT technologies, not just for efficiency for running the building and visibility into what's going on, but also for non-traditional and modular uses. Maybe your whole building is not subdivided in the way that they always have been. Maybe it's one big space that individual companies can schedule desks in when they want them, and it's just sort of a big shared use space. Yep. Turns out WeWork was right, just too early and bad at it.
I won't say anything because we're in a WeWork space in Boston. I wouldn't like them to kick me out. To your point, and that's something that's interesting also because, analysts have written a lot about IoT and still do. They saw it too soon, too big a few years ago. Yeah. Now really we're seeing it taking off. Now it's the big players that are moving in, that are going down the digitalization path. It's no longer just the small tech savvy innovative companies. Now we're getting the big guns. So it's really happening now. So later than they expected, but I think it might even be bigger than what they expect. And it's already expected to be huge. Exactly for what you were talking about, because who would have thought of Facebook when internet started? No one would have foreseen that, and that huge company generating billions of dollars. And an example with what you were saying, you could have some startup that's using IoT to do a sort of Uber of use your space, real-time alerts. I'm making it up. It's probably a bad idea, but you see what way I'm going. Right. In France, I know that there's an insurance company. They built a device, a Sigfox-enabled device that you put in your car, so your car, a rental car or something like that. And in fact, you don't subscribe for a yearly insurance. You've got a sort of an app. And when you start the car, it basically starts your insurance based on the data you get from that little device. And that device is going to monitor that you've driven for, 10 minutes, 2 miles. And on your app, you're going to get, you've been billed for 5 cents. I don't know, I'm making the numbers up. So you're only insured for actually your usage. Once again, I don't know if that will be the big thing of tomorrow, but there are things that are going to come that we don't foresee.
Right. The sort of unintended, unexpected consequences of IoT technology are potentially huge. And it's sort of the case that I've been making for years about not letting the power of edge networking make us forsake the sort of big data in the cloud thing, because I think a lot of that big data analysis is what's going to give us insight into these sort of unexpected cases that we can't predict. But I have so many questions about that insurance thing that we don't have time to talk about now. Like, what happens if somebody hits my parked car? Who covers that? Like, I have,
and I don't know the contract.
Jeremy, I want a full dossier on this company by the end of the day. I need to know everything.
It's on its way. No, but I'm talking about the future. But even today, we were talking about logistics. We were talking about space occupancy. I think also one of the consequences of COVID, people want to be safe. And we've just implemented air quality monitoring in 2 universities. And I think that's going to be big also. And if people are listening to that in schools or in universities, please reach out to us. It's basically sensors to measure the CO2 levels in the different rooms. And like that, if the air has been renewed. So from a COVID point of view, and from, unfortunately, for your listeners in California, when you've got a lot of pollution through fires and things like that, it's important. And I think that's a very easy to understand and deploy use case, but it can make big difference when all those schools and universities are trying to get students back in class.
Sure. And I want to go down this rabbit hole too, but I think that the idea of air quality monitoring, which has been a really hard nut to crack as a general rule, there's a lot of pseudoscience involved in it in certain places. But when done well, I think it can be really, really powerful because, as you say, CO2, carbon monoxide, radon, all the stuff that you get your sort of house and buildings inspected for can be automatically sensed. Now with sort of airborne infectious agents like COVID and things like that, you've got to have very particular filtration systems in your HVAC systems. And if you've calibrated your sensors properly, I expect you could sense that those are working properly. And that's that kind of thing.
Technician over because he needs to do something about the system that's going awfully wrong. Yeah, it makes a difference. And we already do it in universities like that, but we also do it at city level in California, in one or two cities where we measure the pollution. And there the consequence, I don't know if they do that in California, but I definitely know that they do it in Europe. When you reach a certain level of pollution that really becomes dangerous, or at least they can't deny that it's dangerous, they reduce the traffic.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Phoenix Fund project, because I am, as we're getting near the end of time, I don't want to leave this one out because I think it's really, really interesting, this sort of partnership that you worked on in Puerto Rico. So can you tell us all a little bit about how that works and what it was about?
Of course. So we have signed an exclusivity with a company that's now called Sigfox Puerto Rico. I expect everyone to be aware, because you are in the US, but if there are any people outside of the US listening, Puerto Rico is actually part of the US, since a status that's a little bit different from other states, but it's part of the US. It's an island, and we sign an exclusivity with them. So they are deploying the Sigfox network in Puerto Rico and working with all the local players to deploy some solutions. We're very excited because they are from Puerto Rico. They know the ecosystem well. Plus, for us, it's US deploying a nationwide network takes time. Today, we're around a third of the population covered, around 5% of the territory. So we're in the main cities, main ports, main airports. But there in Puerto Rico, we're going to actually have full coverage of the island. And it's interesting to see what you can do when you've got full coverage. So we're excited because they're great guys. They're a great company. They know a lot about the Puerto Rico economy and the right people there. And plus, it's going to be a bit like those when you visit one house and you get a feeling of what the real estate is going to be like in French, because I know you like my French. We call it a maison témoin. So no, really exciting and great guys. And they're also news to come soon, because they're not going to limit themselves to Puerto Rico, and they'll be moving to some other area in the Caribbean.
What kind of use cases are they putting in place? Is it environmental monitoring? What are they looking into?
Well, they're looking into the full scope of what Sigfox can do. So they're looking at working with the municipality. So they've been a bit late in their deployment. They've not achieved 100% coverage yet because COVID slowed things down. Just one thing that I didn't mention, they're also part of a group that does internet, ISP, cable internet. So they also approach their B2B customers with a full suite of services. So to give you an example, and I don't want to give away because I don't know what's confidential and what isn't, but I know that they were going to some network of not really shops where people go and coming with, we'll provide you internet capacity, IPTV for the people that are waiting, plus IoT solutions for the air quality, for your stock management, for the temperature, et cetera, et cetera. So they've got an interesting approach there also. And they're working with the municipalities. They're working also in the agriculture. We're getting traction, and that's quite funny for a European, and it's not true in every state, of course, but around cannabis agriculture. Because we are robust, easy to deploy, and inexpensive, it's ideal to tackle the legal constraints around cannabis tracking, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that actually cannabis is going to be a growing market for IoT over the next, it might take 10 years or so before it's actually starting to happen. But agriculture is huge. They need implementation, if only to eliminate waste. Waste is such a big problem. So there's a recent article up on IoTforall.com that you can read about some food wastage issues being ameliorated with IoT technology. I think that the cannabis marketplace and the growers, and as that becomes more accessible and legalized throughout the world, it's going to be a place where it makes a lot of sense to have IoT implementation. So that's going to be an interesting one. And I've had, again, several conversations over the last 2 years with some folks in that marketplace specifically, and how they can start looking into IoT implementations. So there's some fun opportunities there. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, and I want to give you the floor for a moment. If there's anything we haven't talked about yet that you really want the listeners to be thinking about over the next couple of months as we hopefully pull into the backside of COVID and start moving forward.
No, I think we've touched base on a lot of it, and I think these are exciting times. And I like to quote Winston Churchill. Although there's a lot of doubt, did he really say that? Not too sure, but I like it, so I'll quote him anyway, saying that the pessimistic sees the difficulties in every opportunity, and the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And I think we're going through tough times, but it's going to change a lot of things, and hopefully a lot of them better.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That's a wonderful Churchill quote, and like all Churchill quotes, is probably apocryphal. My favorite Churchill quote will not be said in the air. Sorry, listeners. You're going to have to meet up with me in person to hear this one. Thank you so much, Jeremy Prince of Sigfox, for taking some time to chat with me today about all of this. It's always a pleasure to have you, and I think the listeners are glad we did.
Thank you for having me. As you said, always a pleasure, and I enjoy it.
Thanks again to all of you listening out there. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and if you have, please make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our episodes. We post every week, and I hope you'll leave us a rating, review, and comment on your favorite podcasting platform. If you'd like to suggest a guest, please click on the link in the description. And we also have a great sister podcast on our network called the IoT for All podcast, so make sure you check that out.
Hey Ken, let me jump in real quick and introduce your audience to another awesome show on the IoT for All Media Network, the show that started it all, the IoT for All podcast, where I bring on experts from around the world to showcase successful digital transformation across industries. We talk about use cases and IoT solutions available in the market, and provide an opportunity for those companies to share advice to help the world better understand and adopt IoT. So if you're out there listening and haven't checked it out, be sure to go check out the IoT for All podcast, available everywhere.
Thank you, Ryan. Now get back to your show. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Let's Connect. I've been Ken Briota, editorial director of IoT for All, and your host. Our music is Sneaking on September by Otis McDonald. And this has been a production of the IoT for All Media Network. Take care of yourselves. You are listening to the IoT for All Media Network.